Hello, I've got 2 minutes to address a question that should be of fundamental importance to all of us. The question is, what's the point of education? Okay, we're so deeply embedded into it, we often don't think about this question or the answers. In fact, there have been many answers being proposed, but for me, two stand out. One of them is what I call the social good argument. And this is that the point of education is to turn out doctors and lawyers, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, worker bees for factories, teachers, and maybe even politicians, God help us. The other argument is that it's kind of the personal emancipation argument, that the focus should be on the individual, and the point of education is to produce within each of us the skills and dispositions and sensitivities to lead good, socially responsible, fulfilling and rich lives. And these are sometimes put in opposition, but to me they're not. To me, education can do both. I want to just reflect a little bit and be a bit indulgent and talk about one of the great influences on my life, a teacher that I had for a brief time when I was a graduate student in the UK, Jerome Bruner, a wonderful visionary American educator and thinker. And he said, I remember a lecture that he gave all those years ago, saying that the pace of change is so great that every generation of educators has to reinvent and rethink and recreate the curriculum for the next generation, because information will have changed, the knowledge, skills and demands have changed and so on. Of course, the problem for people like me who are responsible for doing curriculum development and so on, and people like you and even entry-level teachers, is the fact that we just don't know what the world's going to be like next year. I mean, just think back the last 12 months, for example, what's happened. We don't know what the world's going to be like next year. So how can we develop and provide curriculum and educational experiences for learners born today, kids born today, like a couple of my grandkids, when we don't know what the world's going to be like next year, let alone in 20 years' time, when they're going to be leaving formal education and going out into the world, looking for further education or looking for work. Educators have come up with what they think, and I'm fairly convinced by this as well, we need to refocus and change the direction of education. We need to be thinking in terms of specifying educational learning opportunities, not in terms of teachers and input, but in terms of learners and output. And Bruno would have been really happy about that, because he was always saying what we need in education is more learning, less teaching. And that's that's something that stayed with me and influenced my whole approach to the development of learning-centered curricula and all the rest of it. Another principle is that and it's kind of related in a way, is that we should focus not on the transmission of content, but on the development of knowledge and skills. And again, this isn't a new idea. Over 2,000 years ago, Socrates, the great Greek philosopher, said that education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Okay, we don't take the cranium off the students and pour the content in. And so what we need to do when we're assessing the success of what we do is in terms of the competencies and the skills that the learners display as a result of instruction or at the end of an instructional process, not on what they've been able to memorize and regurgitate. So where does language fit into this? Well, I've argued elsewhere that language is the ideal vehicle for developing these what are now called 21st century skills and competencies. Communication skills, obviously, but I would argue that for all competencies, language is central. The ability to work collaboratively, this is a really big deal, and captains of industry and commerce are saying that what they need is collaborative teams, not the efforts of individuals working in a silo, as it were. But creativity, the development of autonomy, learning how to learn, multilingual and multiliterate skills and so on and so forth. Language is an ideal vehicle for achieving these ends. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is great in theory, but how would it work in practice? Unfortunately, my time's up. I've reached the end of my 2 minutes. I do have answers, but they'll have to wait for another time. And so if you're interested in those answers, I suggest that you keep following TIRF, keep coming back to TIRF, and we'll be providing opportunities for you to engage. If you're interested in these answers, in looking at solutions to these answers, I urge you to become engaged. And so with that little teaser, I'll say goodbye and thank you for listening.